What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel and to this review of FabFilter Pro-R 2, the latest update to their absolutely amazing reverb plugin. And I'm not necessarily in the business of doing these videos anymore, but whenever FabFilter puts out a plugin, I just can't resist. They make such good stuff. I had to try it out and make a video about it. And if you just look at it, you might think, oh, okay, they haven't changed that much, but it's actually quite substantial what they did from version 1. And I have some examples set up to basically highlight all of the new functions here and kind of explain what each of these parameters does, which is what I'm gonna do now. So I'm just gonna briefly go over the main functions and then through the examples show what they actually do. At the top here, the elephant in the room is basically this space knob here, and this dictates how long the decay is. And it's also, if you see here, it kind of simulates room sizes. So here you have the smallest space, really claustrophobic, all the way up to 10 seconds. You have also a cathedral icon here, and you also have the rate of the decay here. So with this, you can tweak the decay in each individual room that you select. Maybe you really like that, but the 100% is sounding a bit too short for you, so you can just push it a bit and you still have the same room, but it has a longer decay time, which is something really cool. You can really fine-tune the sound of that room, and you can see it doesn't matter how long this becomes, it's still that room. And the unique thing here is you blend these rooms together. You don't have to make decisions on whether or not you only like this one and then bam, or maybe I like this one. This is fully automatable and you can just go from room to room to room. It's almost as if in a physical space the room itself gets bigger and bigger. Then on the left hand side, they finally put the pre-delay up here because it was low here in the right hand side in the version 1. It just makes more sense to have it here, and this basically dictates when the reverb actually starts doing things. And you can do it in milliseconds, from no pre-delay to quite a long pre-delay, half a second. And you could also do it in subdivisions, no subdivisions, for pretty cool rhythmic effects. And you can offset it, so you can give it a bit of a groove. It doesn't have to be strictly aligned to one of those notes. Then we have the character knob, and this basically dictates how much modulation is applied to the sound. The thickness knob is new, and it dictates how thick, how dense the reverb is, how much buildup is happening, as well as add a bit of saturation, and we'll hear that in action soon. The distance is basically the distance from you to the perceived reverb coming back to you. So this is really claustrophobic. At 0%, it's really close. The whatever you're putting, whatever signal you're inputting into Pro-R, it's gonna feel really close, and then if you go all the way up, it's gonna feel really far. And obviously that works well with some longer decays and longer spaces. And then also it works in conjunction with the brightness knob. So this is basically trimming the top end. So technically in the real world, what happens is the bigger the space, the less top end you'll have on the reverb. So you can trim it down if you want to have a huge space, simulate a cathedral, lots of distance, and pretty dark. But you can experiment with that, and if you have lower decay times, you can also make it brighter. On some sense, this actually maxed out sounds really good. Next, we have the width control, so either completely mono or stereo. It goes to multi-mono, so dual mono when it gets 100%, and then beyond that it just boosts the level of the sides. So technically you should have a better representation of that reverb on a mono speaker, on a phone or whatever. And then this new thing here, ducking. So you basically apply ducking to the reverb based on the incoming signal. So if you have a drum, you really want to put nice lush reverb on it, but it would get muddy if the reverb would also affect the initial transients. And with something like this, you can just duck it and it's not going to affect it on that. You'll have a percussive sound, a really impactful sound, but you'll have the long tail. And obviously this is really cool for vocals as well, because if you push the initial start of the reverb, you'll get a clear sense of what the vocal is saying. It's going to feel more present in the mix, and it kind of works as a pre-delay, but more organic and more reacting to the actual input signal. And you also have an auto gate, and you can also time it, of course. This is going to be apparent on drums. Of course, you can do it on something else, but instead of making the decay time go down in a natural way, this basically just cuts it, and you can select how long that decay will be. And again, on drums, this will be more and more apparent. You also have a freeze button, so you can, whatever's in the buffer is gonna just stay there forever, and you do have some parameters that you can play around with once that freeze button is engaged to modify that sound even more. And then of course the mix knob, so you can go from 0 to 100, and you can also lock it in case you want to go through presets. This won't change if it's engaged. If not, every preset will kind of have its own different mix. Even though it's an algorithmic reverb, you can import your own IRs. It's not something I usually do, so I'm not gonna focus on it, and it's not the key thing of this reverb, but it is good that they included it here, because on the FabFilter forum, this was one of the most requested features, so it's nice that they obliged us. So let's go to the default setting and then also analyze this thing here. It's not new, it is unique still, in the sense that you have a post EQ here, basically operates like a Q3, nothing that extraordinary. You can basically just limit the frequencies in that reverb. This is standard stuff, but what isn't standard is the decay curves here, so you can basically tell it at what rate to decay on each frequency. So for instance, if you have something like a really boomy guitar sound, you might not want that low end to resonate as much, or if you want to give it a bit of a presence, you might want to add some decay, longer decay rate on the top strings, and it just makes it slightly more sizzly. You can play around with this a lot, and we'll see in the examples how powerful this is, but these are the main functions, the main elements of the reverb, save for, of course, the preset folder here. But I'm just going to go to default and play around with some settings based on the examples that I have here. And I'm not going to do that much talking. I'm going to play around with the settings just so you hear what all of these can do on each of these individual sounds. And I just realized that I forgot to mention the 3 styles that you have here. So you have a modern style, which is the algorithm of R1. You have a vintage style, which is probably more akin to something like Valhalla's vintage verb. It's based on these old vintage reverb modules. And then you also have a plate algorithm. And let's try the plate on this guitar. Well, those are quite different, and you can see how, in my view, better the plate algorithm sounds for something like this. Moving on to a different example, let's hear it on some vocals. And this ducking feature is really amazing and really organic sounding. You saw how much it made a difference in the perceived presence of that vocal. Initially, there's more or less no reverb if I go to plus 48 dB, and then when she stops singing, you hear that long decay. Let's make that mono. And you can really hear the saturation that adds here with the thickness. And this plate algorithm is amazing. It sounds fantastic on this vocal as well. Let's move on to some drums. And the thickness here, the saturation actually acts as a compressor. So you hear how it levels out the reverb, which can be quite useful for something like this. And what you can notice here with the vintage, if you look at the analyzer, it actually band limits the top end. So check this out. So it gets rid of everything past 15K. And let's say you don't want that much sizzle on the top end. You want just the snare to pop out. So with the ducking, it mutes basically the reverb on those hits, but then you again hear that bloom at the end. And you can really feel the difference that this distance knob makes. And let's try the gate. And let's try using something like this for a beat like this might actually be one of the best functions in here, even better than ducking, just because it will always cut on the beat and you won't get overlapping reverb tails, which is usually a problem with drums. So this is basically where you're heading, and then you can offset it a bit just to be slightly longer. That's a great sound. So it's pretty insane. We can unfreeze, and the clicks that you heard were not from the plugin itself, or from the buffer that I'm using for OBS to actually record this. Let's try something. Say we have a higher pitched thing here. And we unfreeze. So that's just the tip of the iceberg with Pro-R 2. There's so many amazing spaces that you can create with something like this. You have a lot of hidden functions in a way under the hood, with the distance, with the thickness. These are doing multiple things at the same time, as opposed to some other reverbs where you have a whole list, a spreadsheet of parameters to play around with. This condenses everything and makes it really usable and user friendly. So I recommend you give this one a go. The demo is free, 30 days you can use it. I most likely will get this myself, and I hope you enjoyed the video. See you next time.